Hello, 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 and welcome to everyone joining us tonight. My name is LaJoy Royston, and I'm the program director for Trey Athletes. Thank you all for being here tonight. This fireside chat will be a conversation with Daniel Cnossen, moderated by my colleague Brian Reynolds, on athlete mental toughness and well-being. Following the moderated discussion, there will be a live Q&A session. We urge all of our participants to submit questions at any time throughout the conversation using the Q&A function. If you do submit questions, you will have the opportunity to come on live and ask your question on video if you would like to. For all of our season 3 participants, don't forget that your team can win a pizza party by engaging with us on social media. Don't forget to tag us at Trey Athletes. We'll drop our tag in the chat right now. We'll be also posting additional rules about our social media on Instagram, so make sure you check us out there. Tonight's chat is presented by Trey Athletes. We are a Dallas-based youth sports nonprofit, and our mission is to empower athletes to be leaders, role models, and influential voices for their communities. We believe that by providing high school athletes with the opportunity to learn from amazing speakers, such as Dan Cnossen, they will be provided with necessary insights that can help them be successful on and off the court or field. I'll be back at the end of the conversation to share a few reminders. I hope you enjoyed this amazing conversation. And with that, I'm passing it off to Brian.
Thank you so much, LaJoy, and welcome, everyone. I'm Brian Reynolds, co-founder and co-CEO of Trey Athletes. Tonight, we have a very special guest, and crazy enough, he and I grew up in the same hometown of Topeka, Kansas. Like they say in the movie Almost Famous, we're just real Topeka people, man. And I can tell you, tonight's conversation is going to be one you don't want to miss. In order to not spoil the surprise of his incredible story, I'll be giving a shortened version of Dan's bio up front tonight. And for anyone who knows me well, you know I'm the hype man for all things Trey Athletes. So underhyping Dan is going to be tough for me, but we're going to save the bulk of his incredible accomplishments for our conversation. So to begin, Daniel Cnossen was born just outside Topeka, Kansas, where his family has worked for 5 generations on their family farm. After high school, Dan attended the U.S. Naval Academy for college, where he majored in English. As one of only 16 class members accepted for SEAL training as officers, Dan completed Navy SEAL training in the fall of 2003. Subsequently, he deployed on countless missions and received numerous awards and recognitions for his work in Iraq and Afghanistan. After being named a platoon commander for the Navy SEALs, Dan went on to earn 2 master's degrees from Harvard, including a master's in public administration from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and a master's in theology from the Harvard Divinity School. Dan's story of becoming a world-class Olympic athlete is like something out of a movie or a best-selling novel, and he's going to be talking with us tonight about athlete mental toughness and well-being. With nicknames that include Danny Boy, Danger Dan, C Nasty, Disco Dan, and Bada Bing, we are incredibly grateful and thankful to welcome tonight's Trey Season 3 speaker, Dan Cnossen.
Hey, Brian, how's it going? Thanks for having me here. I'm really curious where you managed to find those nicknames. I thought they were long buried in my past, but you've done excellent research. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Dan. We really appreciate it. And I'll teach you my research secrets some other time. So before we start, a real brief word on athlete mental toughness and well-being. One of the most overused cliches in all of sports is that 90% of performance is mental. The problem is that 90% of coaches and athletes spend 100% of their time working only on the physical elements of their sport. As we'll hear from Dan tonight, being our best selves, both on and off the court or field, is often due to being emotionally healthy and mentally prepared, having resilience during tough moments, and goal setting for success. Further, mental health is often stigmatized, meaning people are discriminated against due to a long history of misunderstanding mental health. As so many of us have seen and felt during the coronavirus pandemic, nothing can be more harmful than feeling isolated and alone during a time of crisis. So for anyone struggling with mental or emotional health, please, please, please seek help from a trusted adult. To kick things off tonight, Dan, take us back to Topeka, Kansas, and tell us about how you would have described yourself in high school before college. Like, what sports did you play? What extracurricular activities were you involved in? Tell us everything.
Sure. Well, as you said in the bio, I did grow up on a 5-generation family farm, and that history, that deep rootedness in Kansas was something I'm very proud of. And growing up as a kid, I was just outside all the time, playing outside on the farm, running around, getting into a little bit of trouble with my BB gun. I'm not going to go into details, but it was a childhood that I'm very thankful for, because I did develop a deep-seated love of being outside, and that really comes into play in my story later on. As an athlete, I was mainly into soccer, wasn't so good at ball sports, but was pretty good at the running part. But I certainly developed a lot of teamwork skills that came into play later in the military. And so for that, I'm also very thankful. I did a little bit of volunteering at the local hospital and did a lot of lawn mowing on the farm, a lot of time spent out there with the tractor driving around. And in high school, I knew that I wanted to combine military service with going to college. And that kind of led me towards wanting to apply to a U.S. Service Academy. I applied to West Point for the Army and the Naval Academy, where you can be either a naval officer or a Marine. And in my senior year of high school, I found out that I had become accepted into the best one, the Naval Academy, and that's where I was heading after graduating high school.
That's amazing. So talk to us a little bit. After graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy, you went on to pursue SEAL training, which we talked about. Talk to us about what SEAL training entails and about the mental toughness needed to complete SEAL training.
Sure. Well, I'll back up and just say when I went to the Naval Academy, I wanted to be a Marine. My father had served in the 1960s in the Vietnam War as a Marine, and I kind of grew up with some stories about that and wanted to be a Marine. And 1/5 of the graduating class from the Naval Academy can go into the Marine Corps. But by the end of my first year, I took a good look around at my circle of friends, the people who I naturally just had a lot of common interest with, and they all wanted to be selected for the SEAL program when we would graduate 3.5 years from now. And a couple of these people were all-American swimmers in high school. And then there was me, this kid from a farm in Kansas. And I had a problem when I showed up at the Naval Academy. And the problem was I was scared of the water, which is a problem for anybody going to the U.S. Naval Academy. But it really is a problem if you go to the Naval Academy and you want to be selected for SEAL training. So needless to say, I had to get in the pool. And my friends who were the all-American swimmers, they really helped me. And I helped them with the running, which they weren't so good at. And collectively, we worked together to achieve our goal, which is to be selected to go to BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL. And as you said in the bio, only 16 in my class got selected. It's very competitive. All that meant being selected was we had a ticket to the front door. We still had to get through this training, which is considered the most arduous and selective in the US military. And BUDS, as it's called, is a 7-month school with follow-on training after that. It's pretty much known for 1 week though. And this week is called Hell Week. And it's the week that gets the most attention. Why is that? Well, Hell Week, it's only about the 4th or 5th week in this very long process, starts sometime on a Sunday evening and it ends sometime during the day on the following Friday. And you don't know when it's going to start and you don't know when it's going to end. You just know it's going to start Sunday evening. You know it's going to end the following Friday. And you know you're not going to sleep once, not once, until sometime on Wednesday. So that's an all-nighter Sunday night, an all-nighter Monday night, an all-nighter Tuesday night, no naps, no sleep breaks, constant physical activity. And according to this rumor, as I'm in SEAL training about to start Hell Week, knowing I'm not going to sleep once until sometime on Wednesday. And that first sleep break, it's only going to be about 45 minutes long. And you only get 2 or 3 more sleep breaks the rest of the week of similar length, about 45 to maybe 60 minutes long. It's just enough sleep through Hell Week to keep you from getting brain damage. And they're really pushing you to your limits. I mean, your mental and physical limit, and you're brought to the brink of hypothermia and surf torture sessions. You're laying in the surf zone with the cold Pacific Ocean washing up and you're just freezing wet and cold, and you're tempted to quit by a blazing fire behind you on the beach with the SEAL instructors yelling, "Hey, anybody who quits, you can come drink hot chocolate, warm up, go to sleep for as long as you want." So you're just constantly tempted to quit. And I was wondering, as I'm about to start Hell Week, am I going to have the mental fortitude to get through this, to really, really stick it out? And well, I'm going to get into a story here pretty soon that's going to elaborate on that.
Very cool. I cannot fathom what that experience must be like. But I can say that during our prep call, you did tell me about a particular time during Hell Week that forced you well beyond your comfort zone. Could you please describe that experience for us?
Sure. I do think this story of the first night in Hell Week is worth saying, because this experience that I'm about to describe really helped me later on in my life. And it still helps me as an athlete now. And I think it's a very good story for any up and coming athlete. And in a nutshell, it's the middle of the night and it's the first night of Hell Week. So it's Sunday night, maybe it's 1 or 2 in the morning. I don't really know. We weren't allowed to wear watches. We're forming up for the second major race in Hell Week, and everything in Hell Week is structured as a race. You're in teams of 7. This team is referred to as a boat crew. And the first race was head carrying these big inflatable rubber boats 8 miles through the soft sand south from Coronado. And so I was already tired, cold, wet, and hungry. You can imagine how uncomfortable it is racing with a boat on your head in a team of 7. And we're forming up for this next major race, which is going to be a telephone pole race. Telephone poles are for training. They're referred to as logs, and they're long enough for a 7-person team to carry. And my team stepped up to the bed of a government pickup truck to receive our log administratively at this point, because the race hadn't begun. And we received it in our arms and just groaned under the weight of this thing. It was so heavy. It was way too heavy. Not supposed to be this heavy. Why is this thing so heavy? Can we swap it out for one of the other logs in the truck? No way. We're stuck. We get caught if we tried to change it out. So we're stuck with this thing. Why is it so heavy? I was thinking, is it waterlogged? Did it fall in the ocean? Anyway, all the teams in the class are now assembled, and I'm just looking at the other teams and think their logs don't come close to approximating the weight of this one, yet we have to race them in this next race. This is so unfair. The race begins, and 10 minutes into it, it was not going well for my team. We're in last place, and you really want to win or finish towards the front in these Hell Week races because you're given precious rest. And the last place team really, really gets punished by the SEAL instructor staff. So we're in last place. And I should also say this, under the log, there are 2 positions that are considered to be the worst. One is the far left end and the other is the far right end, because you don't have someone on the other side of you. And I was the junior officer and the leader of this team. So I had intentionally put myself into one of those 2 positions, in this case, the far left end of the log. But when you're under the log, everyone is supposed to be carrying their fair share of the weight. And if someone lets up with their arms, if even for just a second, you can really feel the weight in your own arms just go up. And so you can imagine what starts to happen in this scenario. Accusations start flying about who is it that's slacking off. The tension and tempers can flare, and the whole thing can fall apart. And that's what was starting to happen under this log, under the pressure of the situation. We're in last place. This log's so heavy, we're struggling. When you're in last place in a Hell Week race, you're like a magnet for the SEAL instructors. They descended upon the team like a pack of wolves, screaming at us in the megaphones, hurry up, hurry up. Honing in on me, the junior officer and the leader of this team, just get it together, sir. Start leading your team. We're going to drop you from training. So I let it get to my head because I wanted to scream at them. This isn't a fair race. It's not fair. But I had to keep it internal. And the frustration of the situation compounded the physical pain. I started thinking long-term thoughts. How am I going to get through tonight? This is just the first night of Hell Week. I still have 5 more days to go. How am I going to do back-to-back-to-back sleepless nights? I've never done that before. Friday seems impossibly far away when it's only Sunday night. You're only a few hours into Hell Week. You're in the most physical pain you've ever been in your life. And you know you're going to only sleep a few hours the entire week. And doubt crept into my head and exploded. And I started thinking really long-term thoughts like, I'm not meant to be a Navy SEAL. What am I doing? What am I doing here? Why am I putting myself through this? I should just quit. And I was at my breaking point. I was ready to quit. And I convinced myself to play a silly little game, a last-ditch effort to hang in there. And this is at the end of my rope, but the game looked like this. It's happening in my mind faster than I can relate it to you in words, but you're free to quit, but first you got to take one more step. So I took that step. I'm not ready to quit. Just keep playing this game. Took another step with my team under the log. Not ready to quit. Take another step. Keep playing this game. And just playing this game one step. It shrunk my time span from these long-term thoughts of the future that were really weighing me down into just being in this moment, playing this game. I'd have some personal control. I can quit when I want, but first I got to take another step through the soft sand. I take that step, realize I've just taken that step. Therefore, I can take another one. I don't know if I can take 50. I don't know if I can take 100, but I know I can take one step. ultimately, I learned that the best way to block out all of these long-term thoughts of the future, which can only be discouraging during moments of extreme pressure, stress, sleep deprivation, pain, is to focus on the task at hand. In this case, literally the log in my arms right in front of me, to prioritize and rigorously focus on what you actually need to do right now to get through this difficult moment. That's it. Just focusing on what you need to do, which for me was two things: support the log to the utmost of my ability with my arms. And number two, advance the log forward with my team through the soft sand, one step at a time. And that's it. One step at a time, one more step.
Wow. I'm with you. I think I could maybe take one more step, but then beyond that, who the heck knows what's going to happen? I do know that another area we talked about was specifically how your time as a SEAL taught you this mental toughness, how to persevere through adversity. And you mentioned specifically by accomplishing these short-term goals. So I guess, Dan, could you talk to us a little bit? How do you build success through goal setting?
Sure. Well, under the log that night in Hell Week, whether I knew it or not at the time, I was just really getting weighed down by long-term thoughts of the future. Granted, having long-term goals was my motivation. There's no way I would have gotten through Hell Week and all of SEAL training if I didn't want to be a Navy SEAL. And I had set that goal years back. And under that log, things were spiraling out of control faster than I could manage due to some unlucky circumstances. But I reeled it back in by playing that game where essentially putting these long-term goals or long-term thoughts of the future on the back burner, focusing on the task at hand, which is this log in my arms, realizing that I didn't need to be thinking about when is this race going to end. I didn't need to be thinking about how am I going to get through tonight? How am I going to make it to the first sleep break on Wednesday? How on earth am I going to make it to the conclusion of Hell Week on Friday? Those thoughts were irrelevant to the task at hand. There's just two things I needed to do. Number one, support the log with my arms. Number two, advance it forward with my team, one step at a time. Debatably, number three is to start leading, to be a leader. And I did start yelling some encouragement to come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. So that's, I guess, my take on goal setting is long-term goals can be really, really powerful. And it's okay if you don't have long-term goals right now. And in my experience, the best kind of long-term goals or the ones that we naturally just want to adhere to are the ones that are innate. And you don't need anybody to tell you what your long-term goals should or shouldn't be. They're yours. But sometimes when things get really difficult, if you think about how far away these long-term goals are, they can just add a little more stress or pressure, physical weight to the already heavy log that you're carrying. So when the stress goes up, your time outlook can compress down, shrink it down. When you have more time, then you can be thinking about these long-term thoughts. Where do you want to go? How are we doing? Checking in. But when the intensity is up, your time span goes down and you focus one step at a time. And that's micro goals. And that's just how I see goal setting, that it's a fluid process, and that these micro goals feed into short-term goals, which feed into midterm goals, which can feed into the long-term goals. And long-term goal setting is all about just achieving your dreams, going to awesome places and doing awesome things with your life.
So talking to someone who's clearly gone to awesome places and done awesome things with his life, I think that's a really digestible way for especially a young athlete to really sort of internalize all of that, right? I think we've all heard kind of the saying, like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So after 6 years as a SEAL, you were promoted to platoon commander. Could you please tell us the story of what happened to you in Afghanistan in 2009?
Sure. I did get through all of SEAL training in 2003, and I started doing deployments as a junior officer in the SEAL teams. And I eventually, by the time 2009 came around, and I'm 7 years into my career at this point as a junior officer, was a platoon commander, which at this point is the most significant leadership role I had held thus far in the SEAL teams. I was the officer in charge of an 18-person SEAL platoon, directly responsible for mission planning and execution and the safety and well-being of the members of the platoon. And so as a key leader in the platoon, it was incumbent upon me to deploy in advance of the rest of the platoon. We had received our deployment orders to go to Afghanistan. We had done an 18-month platoon training workup along. You really gel with the platoon. And so we're very tight. And I deployed 2 to 3 weeks in advance to go to Afghanistan, get on the ground there and meet up with the 2 SEAL platoons that were already in country at the time to see how they were planning and conducting operations, so that by the time the rest of the platoon arrived a couple of weeks later, I'd be in a position of a bit more experience on the ground, and they could then flow more seamlessly into our platoon operations. So the plan was to, with these 2 SEAL platoons, and I'm shadowing and I'm observing. I'm not going to be in a leadership role on this very first mission that we're going to be going on. I'm just there to watch. But certainly it is going to be a dangerous operation. The plan was to take 40 members via helicopter, insert us, and then I would be part of a 10-man element that was assigned to detach from the main assault force and proceed to the top of a large hill that overlooked a target compound down below. Now, the majority of the SEALs are going to go, which we say assault, which is to essentially conduct a raid on a target compound to go after some Taliban or Al-Qaeda individuals. And I'd be up on the top of a hill, which is a key tactical position. So that's generally the scheme and the plan. We go to our huts and we kitted up. We loaded the helicopters and we flew. It was about a 45-minute flight out of Kandahar airfield. We're sitting on the helicopters. It's loud. You're on night vision goggles. Nobody can really talk. You can hear the radio. We get off the back of the helicopters and they departed. Once they were out of earshot, we started foot patrolling, and when we got to the designated point, the 10-man element that I was a part of, we detached from the main assault force and proceeded to the top of that large hill. We climbed to the top of the hill. The rest of the assault force is positioning itself because after we had secured the top, they're going to initiate that target assault. So we're climbing up to the top of this hill. It's 15, 20 minutes, and there's 10 of us up there. And we get to the top. There's an old fort up there. We don't know if there's anybody up there, so we're kind of trying to be quiet. We're moving very quietly. Everyone's on night vision goggles, so it's green and black, kind of grainy. And I'm moving forward a step at a time and kind of trying to be quiet. And all of a sudden, there was just a flashlight under my night vision goggles, and I was on the ground. I didn't even know what had happened. And I'm just coming to and disoriented, realizing I must have stepped on a pressure plate. A pressure plate is typically buried underground, and the weight of a human or an object up above presses down on the earth, and the 2 plates make a connection, and a bomb goes off. And in this case, the bomb was actually 2 artillery shells wired together, but the second one didn't explode, and the first one went off low order. Not all of the explosive powder detonated, and this can destroy a vehicle. So very, very fortunate. But we didn't know any of this at the time. I'm laying there not knowing if my teammates are okay, if they're even alive. But it turns out none of them were even injured. And so they really quickly started assessing the situation. And the medic up there had to apply several tourniquets. In fact, tourniquets are meant to cut off blood flow to the limb. But in order to do that, you have to really crank it down. And he had to apply 6 tourniquets. And this was the first time that I was really registering pain. And in order to get me down, the helicopters were coming back. Time and fuel is really getting low. So my teammates had to drag me down from that hill because carrying me was just not working. They were tripping and I was falling. And so they're dragging me over really sharp, craggy rocks. The helicopters that are overhead are getting lower and lower on fuel. They're pulling me as hard as they can. It was so painful. All I could do was just try to hang on, stay awake, listen to the medic's words. They did get me down off that hill, loaded onto the helicopter within 1 minute of the helicopter having to depart for reaching bingo fuel, which they don't screw around with that. They're leaving with or without me. Within 1 minute of reaching that, they got me on the bird. I shook my teammate and friend's hand. He got off the back of the helicopter. The ramp comes up. There was a light in my face from the flight surgeon, and then just lights out for me.
Wow. So you've been training your entire life for this type of a moment. You've literally dedicated your career, your body, your heart, your emotion, everything into helping to create opportunity and freedom for our country. You step on an IED, on a bomb, while out on this raid, and after being dragged back to the helicopter, you literally just go out. You go black. What happens next?
The next thing I know, I'm coming to in what appears to be a hospital room with my mom's face about 2 feet away. And I'm thinking, what happened? Where am I? And then I hear a voice. And I look up, and it's my mom. And I'm like, Well, it turns out after being dragged onto that helicopter, I was transported all the way back eventually to the United States. I had to go through many rounds of surgery. I was in a medically induced coma. As all of this was unfolding over several days that are gone to me, my mother and sister were called out of the blue via telephone and told what had happened. And so you can imagine what they were going through. My mom got on a plane in Kansas City, flew to DC. She got to Bethesda Naval Hospital before I was there. And this was such a stressful situation for her. And when she got there, there were many VIPs, like generals and admirals, people that didn't really know me, but they're there because they heard about what had happened and they're there with good intentions, but it's creating a really stressful situation day to day dealing with all this for my mother. So she just wasn't sleeping well. And when I finally got back to Bethesda Naval Hospital, they took me up to the ICU room. And on the particular day that the docs thought I'm now ready to be taken out of this induced coma, they told the on-duty nurse, who told my sister. Lucky for me, my sister Leslie also is a nurse, but she calls down to our mother, who at the time is in the basement of the hospital. It's in the morning, and it was another sleepless night for our mother. She was drinking coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. And so she races up to the ICU, and that's where she is, about 2 feet away from me when I come out of this about 10-day induced coma, wondering, where am I? How did I get here? My last memory was in Afghanistan. And I remember seeing my mother's face right there, and she was crying, but also smiling, happy to see me awake. But the first words out of my mouth were, "Mom, your breath stinks," because the coffee breath was hitting me full force in this sterile ICU room. Now, I remember pretty early on asking a medical professional to the right of my bed whether my legs were gone, because my mind was just clouded by opiates and my lower body was covered in blankets, and I wasn't looking down that way anyway. And no one was telling me anything specific. It was like just not being talked about. And I think I knew, but I asked, and that person replied with a one-word answer, yes. That is a really tough thing to hear. You go from being a Navy SEAL platoon commander on top of the world to all of a sudden finding out that both of my legs are amputated above the knees, and I had a shattered pelvis. It's held in place by an external fixator. I had a colostomy bag, I found out, that is not, I didn't even know what it was, but I pretty quickly came to find out this isn't something that people want to have. I was going through surgery Monday, Wednesday, Friday, week after week after week. And these surgeries were 7 to 10, sometimes 12, 14 hours long. And all of this anesthesia was coursing through my system. It slowed everything down to include my intestines. So I woke up and I had an NG tube up my nose, down my throat, into my stomach. And I had really just awful nightmares that were combining with a fever. So needless to say, this is my ground zero. And unlike in that story that I told you from Hell Week, Under the Log, where I was pushed to my physical and mental limits, or so I thought, I could have quit that at any given point in time. I could have walked away from the log, left, done with the program, if it really did get to be too much. But here now in this ICU room, there's no walking away. I am in this. So it's a totally different situation. And in dealing with this, I learned some valuable lessons that I think can help people and help you all as you are navigating sports and school and the future. So I'd love to talk about some of those lessons, time dependent. Of course, we can also get into that with some of your questions as well.
We would absolutely love that, Dan. And just a reminder, I saw Rebecca put a note in the chat, but just a heads up for our audience, please make sure you submit your questions in the Q&A or the chat for Dan. And if you're interested, you're more than welcome to come on live video and ask your question to Dan in person. So Dan, for so many people, it would have been easier to essentially give up at this point. But knowing you, I don't think that was really ever an option. Can you talk to us about the perspective you took away and the lessons you learned through these experiences?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Now, when I woke up in the hospital, it's not like everything was just fine right away. And I was like, okay, these are my goals. I'm going to go do it. I was thinking a lot, how unlucky was I to step where I did for this bomb to go off? I mean, this was my first and only deployment as a platoon commander, where, I had trained years for this. And this is really the pinnacle kind of deployment where you really get to put your leadership and your skills and your training to the test. And my platoon wasn't even on the ground in Afghanistan yet. They're going to go through a really long and dangerous deployment. I'm not going to be there with them, worried about their safety, feeling totally disconnected from this unit. and just going through all these mental machinations, and just also wondering, what is the rest of my life going to look like? Am I going to get through surgery? Am I going to ever walk again, or will I be in a wheelchair my whole life? Broader implications. How am I going to find meaning and satisfaction, fulfillment, now that I can no longer do this job, which I consider to be my calling, the way in which I had been doing it, the way in which I want to keep doing it, and no longer be a part of this team exactly the way in which I had been a part of it. And I'm thinking, where do I go from here? But ultimately, I did fall back upon that lesson I learned in the log story from Hell Week that I told you, which is that the best way to block out all of these long-term thoughts of the future, which can sometimes and often just be discouraging when you're under conditions of extreme pressure or stress or sleep deprivation or pain, or in this case, now grief and loss, is focusing on the task at hand and prioritizing and focusing on what you actually need to do right now to get through this difficult moment. And in the ICU in the early days, after losing my legs and finding out everything that's going on, my focus, often through necessity, was just to get through the next 5 minutes, through the next minute, when the pain, the nerve pain, was really intense. Just get through today, make it to tomorrow, focus on tomorrow when you get there, and going through a rhythm and a routine of that. Do what it takes to get through today, to make it to tomorrow, focus on tomorrow when you get there. And then the other thing I learned about was perspective. I loved mountaineering and trail running just about more than anything else that I could do in my spare time. And the fact that the legs to do these activities are now gone was a difficult reality for me to accept, but I had to look at the totality of the situation. I could see my mother and sister in the ICU room. I could talk to them. I could hear them and understand them. And even though I at times was overthinking, the fact that I can think clearly, given the concussive effects of the blast and all the blood I lost that night, is so important. And so I realized, I've got my arms and they're going to be good to go. My residual limbs, although amputated above the knees, and I'll have to show you my prosthetic here, they are long enough to be fitted for prosthetics. This is a knee one. And with some, I'm hearing good things about prosthetic technology. It's improved a lot. And with some hard work, I should be able to walk again. And with some really hard work, I should be able to run again. I don't know when that's going to be. I was laying there one day and I was thinking, I was out of the ICU at this point, but very much an inpatient. And I was thinking, whenever I get out in town, and I don't know when that's going to be, people out there are going to look at me differently. I have a new body type. I look quite a bit different than everybody else now. And I don't know whether I'm going to be in a wheelchair or on prosthetic legs. People are probably going to stare. And I don't like this one bit, but I'm going to have to get used to it. Otherwise, I'm going to be a bitter person for the rest of my life. And that's when it suddenly occurred to me that as a double leg amputee, for the first time in my life, I now have the opportunity to stand over 6 feet tall, because I had been 5'9" before my injury, and 6'2" was sounding pretty good. I wasn't blessed with tall genes, and I was thinking, I get these prosthetics, I'm going to boost them up and wear full-length pants. Nobody's going to notice the difference. If you all could see me right now, though, it'd be very clear to you that I'm not standing over 6 feet tall, and you might be wondering why, because it's not that hard to do it. But I just had, the balance was off and my arms are too short, so I'm back down to my 5'9" height. But on this subject of perspective, I got to tell you, when I got into the phase of my recovery where I was doing physical therapy at Walter Reed Military Medical Center, I was surrounded by dozens of injured service members. Some of these individuals were missing 3 and in some cases 4 limbs. I remember thinking, how could I feel sorry for myself? Not to mention those who've been blinded or severely burnt by the IEDs. Their situation seems so much more difficult and painful. And of course, those who are no longer with us today, and how I knew their families would give anything for their loved one to be in this situation, if they had to have been injured, if it had to have happened, to just be missing 2 legs, but to be alive. And this isn't to say that perspective gave me solace and comfort simply because of the greater misfortune of others around me. It is rather to highlight the unique circumstances and set of conditions for which I should be and am grateful. To focus on what I have, not on what I'm missing, and to focus on what I can control, not on what I can't. And for me, that is what the value of perspective is all about. Looking at a situation and challenging yourself to look at a situation from a different angle. Because you see, I was really actually quite lucky to live through this because of the fact that both bombs didn't go off. I would have been vaporized. The fact that none of my teammates were injured. The fact that they got me down off that hill, that there was a helicopter already airborne coming back. It got low on fuel, but they got me on board within 1 minute of it reaching the go home point. And so all of these factors, they actually lined up and they lead me to now conclude decisively that I'm actually incredibly lucky. And this all was about the way that I view the situation, challenging myself to look at a situation from a different angle, which is what perspective is all about.
I think we all have a healthy dose of perspective after that story, Dan. I think to be able to look at a situation and be thankful for what we have as opposed to what we don't. And especially transitioning ahead to our last question here in advance of kind of kicking it over to the audience, you took that opportunity and that perspective and you applied it to competitive endeavors through sport, right? So talk to us a little bit, give us the highlights on all the amazing accomplishments that you've had since that moment in time as it relates to athletics.
Sure. I got out of the hospital in 2011. I've been in there for 2 years. I was approached by a U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee recruiter, kind of assigned to the military hospital that I was at, and was introduced to cross-country skiing and biathlon. And the coaches asked, do you want to do biathlon? I actually thought that was running and swimming, but I came to find out it's cross-country skiing with target shooting. That sounds pretty cool. Cross-country skiing and target shooting. In the SEAL teams, the mantra was move, shoot, communicate. In this sport of biathlon, I'd be skiing and shooting and probably communicating with the coaches from time to time. So it's kind of similar to the military, and I could apply myself, regain a sense of my physicality, see progress, so important after being at that ground zero moment that I talked about, and follow a training plan written by really good coaches and have long-term goals, apply my training and skills overseas, just like the military, be part of Team USA representing the country overseas. It seemed like the obvious thing for me to do coming off of my injury. And I've been doing it now for a decade. And it's just gone by so fast. And I'm near the end of my athletic career, but I'm hanging on for one more Paralympic Winter Games. I went to the 2014 Paralympic Winter Games in Sochi, Russia, as a newer athlete. And then I went to the 2018 Paralympic Winter Games in Pyeongchang, South Korea, as a more seasoned athlete. And I'm hanging on for one more, hopefully next year in China for the 2022 Paralympic Winter Games. And I would love to, in the questions section, to go over any aspects of training or mental performance as it relates to competition. I know we may be getting a little short on time though, so I want to turn it over to you, Brian, and go from here.
This is phenomenal, Dan. So now I get to play my role as hype man, which I'm even more excited about. So what Dan failed to mention is the fact that in 2018 in Pyongyang, he competed in 6 events, medaled 6 times, including a gold medal, and he was named the U.S. Male Athlete of the Year. So before we kick it over to all things Q&A from the audience, Dan, would you want to show us your Paralympic gold?
I will, and I have it right here. It's in the display case, but this is the gold medal from the first race of the games, which was a 7.5 kilometer biathlon. It's 7.5 kilometers is 4.5 miles or so. It was the first race, so I was really nervous. And in biathlon, because you're skiing fast and you come in to the range and you have to take 5 shots and you have to ski another loop that's 7-8 minutes or so fast, come into the range, take another 5 shots. You don't always want to be nervous. And so having the first race be a biathlon, I was kind of nervous, but I executed my mental and physical plan that day pretty well. I had hit 9 out of 9 shots. We were taking 10 shots total. And the 10th shot I missed. And I thought, oh, that was the last shot and I missed it. So I had to go into the penalty loop, ski the penalty lap, which is about 25 seconds, thinking I just blew that race. But a coach pretty quickly was yelling at me, everybody's missed, because it was really windy out there. And so that's kind of a reset. Everybody's missed at least of the top competitors, everybody's missed at least once. So I had a fire in the gut on that last lap, giving it everything I could. And I crossed the line, absolutely spent and totally tired, and ended up squeaking this out by 7 seconds over a 23-minute race. So it can really come down to just a few seconds. So every second counts. And I learned that you're only out of the race if you tell yourself you're out of the race, but you don't ever go to that point until you cross the finish line. And so giving it all I had, if I would have just kind of thought that I kind of blew the race with the miss of that last shot, I wouldn't have gotten this medal, because 7 seconds absolutely is the difference between going hard and just kind of going pretty hard. So yeah, I'm proud of this. It was really awesome to stand on the podium and see the flag and hear the anthem and think about this journey that really started with my desire to go to the Naval Academy, setting goals in high school, working towards those goals. I knew I needed good grades and to be a decent athlete and to have some demonstrated leadership. And so it really kind of just flowed from that, from setting some goals early on in high school. So thanks. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
7 seconds, margin of victory, 6 medals, 1 Dan Cnossen. That's how I feel. So this is a phenomenal story, Dan, and we are so thankful for you sharing it with us today. So we have our first question, which is coming in from one of our Trey athletes. How do you compare your feeling of graduating from the Naval Academy or SEAL training versus winning a gold medal?
That's a great question. I've never thought about that in a comparison way. I think we have cumulative experiences. And when I was on the podium in Korea, getting the gold medal, I was in that moment of time reflecting on my life. And of course, that included going to the Naval Academy. I developed some really great friendships, going to SEAL training, pushing myself beyond the limits that I knew were possible in Hell Week. And that's what really Hell Week teaches you, is your limit is so much further than what you think it actually is. And then being injured and not knowing what my life was going to look like, and then finding out about the Paralympics. And then from there, realizing this is what I want to do. Nobody told me what my goals should or shouldn't be, but I found this, and I'm on a new path now. I had some goals in the military prior to my injury. Now I have a new set of goals. I'm kind of adjusting and then reorienting my life to that. And then having a lot of coaches and help along the way and teammates and all of that. And realizing that this journey in my life, and for all of us, I believe, is so much about the people that are around you and helping you. I never got to that podium by myself. It was all the people helping me. And so reflecting upon that with some gratitude. And then, to be honest, thinking about what I need to do the next day, because I still had 5 more races to go.
The grind never stops. That's incredible. But I love how you bring it back to this idea of team and how you are only part of that machine. I just think that it's so humble. It's so thoughtful of you to consider, how all of that comes together in order to achieve Olympic gold. So our next question comes from Ty Woodson, who wants to know, while being a professional athlete and the leader of a group of military men, how were you able to always maintain a great attitude, build up others, and be a leader every day, even through the most difficult moments?
Great question. Thank you for that. And one of the interesting things that I learned pretty early on in Hell Week as a leader, as a junior officer, where I was the leader of that 7-person boat crew or team, was that when you are exhibiting a kind of leadership called servant leadership, which is what they taught us at the Naval Academy, where you're there as a leader to empower the other members of the team. You're there to let them be the experts that they are and not get in their way, not let your ego as a leader get in the way, realizing you're just one position amongst many others. Like on a sports team, no position is more important than any other. And so having that humility as a leader actually, in a funny way, makes getting through Hell Week and through difficult training scenarios a little bit easier, because if you're being a servant leader, you're actually thinking about the members of the team. Are they doing okay? What do they need? What can I do to help? Should I be yelling a little more encouragement? Thinking about all that stuff projects your own pain and frustration or your own doubts outward, and it lightens your load just a little bit. And so that kind of servant leadership can actually really help you by thinking about other people and how you can help them. It takes your focus away from your own pain and misery and suffering and doubts and insecurity, and puts that all out, and that energy can go out, and you're just thinking about how you can be a better leader and support your teammates.
Servant leadership. We can all learn a lesson from Dan on this one. So our next question comes from another Trey athlete who said, you've earned 2 master's degrees in really different subjects. Why did you choose those degrees? And what are some goals that you have outside of sports?
These are all really great questions. Thank you for asking that. I went to the Kennedy School at Harvard. Coming out of the military, I had gone to the Sochi Paralympic Winter Games as an active duty military member, and got out of the military and had some friends in the Navy who had gone to the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and they really spoke highly about the program. And so I applied, knowing it was a 1-year master's degree, wanting to challenge myself in a different way, but also still very much wanting to train, not knowing exactly how I could balance a full-time master's program with the demands of the training that I needed to do in order to get ready for the 2018 games. But by the end of the first semester at the Kennedy School, I knew that I could balance that with proper time management, and had also met some students from Harvard Divinity School. I was using my GI Bill. So that's a wonderful program. As a veteran, I was able to go for free. And so I wasn't bearing the burden of the exorbitant tuition rates. So I met some Divinity School students, and they said, you can study ethics here, religion and politics. It seemed like it would be a really fascinating continuation of what I was already learning at the Kennedy School, meeting a lot of really interesting people from totally diverse backgrounds, from all walks of life, opening my horizons beyond a Naval Academy military education and my own military experiences. Widening my horizon was really important. And so I continued on, full-time student, and still train, but edging up the training a little bit more now that I'm in the Divinity School and it's getting closer to 2018. And by then I learned the Boston surrounding areas a little bit better for training. And so I was just a little more efficient with my workouts. But I actually think that being a student athlete was one of the key differences between 2014 and 2018. Sure, I was a longer into my athletic career. I had changed some equipment things out, gone from living at high altitude in Colorado to living at sea level in Massachusetts. Those were some differences. I think those are fairly superficial. The real difference was up here, and being in school really forced me to be focused in my workouts. My training session typically would go from like 7:30 to 9:30. Then I got to get ready for class and be in class, study the rest of the day. And so I had to make the most out of that workout and harness it, and then spend the rest of the day recovering, have water in class and snack food so I'm not getting hungry, and really resting, and maybe not doing the second workout that I would have done when I'm a full-time athlete, and actually resting and recovering. And so the other thing was I wasn't thinking about all of the pressures and expectations around competition, because I'm a full-time student. I don't have time to think about that stuff. But now I'm more of a full-time athlete, and I think about that stuff. So being in school really was a wonderful way to kind of channel energy, focus your workouts, reduce a little bit of the pressure of and expectations in performance. So I showed up in 2018, not really expecting anything other than to just do my best where I am right here, right now, do my best. And other than that, no expectations, no pressure, and just take one race at a time and do your best. And it kind of flowed from there.
I feel like there's a great little bit in there for parents and a great little bit in there for student athletes as well, across all of the gyms that you just provided. One being stay in school, kids, for as long as you possibly can. And the second being don't ever skip on the snacks. So we have kind of a serious question here for this next bit. So one of our Trey coaches asks, do you ever feel uncomfortable or judged in society now? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Yes, I do think that when people see me out in town and I'm walking, they assume that I'm an injured service member. Their assumption is correct, but at times people will come up to me and say something like, "Thank you for your service," which is a wonderful thing to say. But sometimes I'm not wearing military clothing ever. or anything that says I'm a veteran. And so it's interesting to me that they make the assumption. Now they're making a correct one, but sometimes people make assumptions, and I'm not always entirely comfortable about that, because I do know people on the Paralympic team, my teammates, who get that as well. And they actually were not in the military, and which is fine. It's just they weren't injured in the military, and yet they're being thanked for their military service. And so that creates an awkward situation. So I'm just reminded about how people often make assumptions based on either no or insufficient evidence. And so that's something just to be aware of. I think it's totally fine to approach someone with a disability and make a conversation, but to launch into it right away with an awkward question. I was in an elevator once, and the first words out of this person's mouth, the first words were, "So how'd you lose them?" And I was thinking, so I kind of played around with that a little bit, like, "Oh, lose what?" And your legs. I'm like, "Well, they're right here. I'm wearing them." And so just kind of toying with it a little bit, but it's just something that I deal with, and it's something, because I wear shorts, and my gait, even if I did wear pants, it's not going to really look totally natural. I need to take prosthetics off throughout the day, so wearing shorts, a lot of people see these things, and it's just something I have to deal with. And more often than not, I just try to think about people's natural curiosity. Kids, of course, have all sorts of funny comments, and just try to have a good attitude about it, and know that people are just naturally curious.
I like the takeaway there is be curious, not judgmental. And it seems like, I guess where I'm going with this is, it seems like you've lived a multitude of lifetimes. And I think one of the things that we've seen sort of consistently from so many of our conversations, and like being able to transport yourself back to being a 16, 17, 18 year old young person, maybe we can kind of end with this idea of what advice would you give to your 17-year-old self right now if you had the opportunity to have that conversation?
Sure. I would say that if you love doing something and thinking about what is it that you love to do, that is a kind of a natural guide when you're thinking about how you're going to structure and craft and orient your life. I also realize, after what I've been through, that we often kind of get torn up inside about ways of reacting, but I do realize that, like, we control the way that we respond, that you really do control that. When I was injured, I didn't have the strong or perfect, whatever society is going to say, like, that reaction that didn't happen right away. That wasn't natural, but ultimately it was a choice that I made, that I'm going to get through this. And so it's all about tapping into whatever sources of motivation you have. If it's internal, that can be a wonderful source of motivation, but sometimes our internal motivation is lacking a little bit. And so my friends and my family that were visiting me, that was a wonderful source of motivation external to me. One of the things that I wanted to ask is, what do you think you would do if you were pushed to your breaking point? And maybe some of you have been in a situation like that before. Maybe you know the answer for yourself. Maybe some of you are feeling like that right now, and that's totally fine. There's a lot going on. And maybe for many of you, a situation like this is coming your way. I'd be willing to bet that there will be a situation like this, at least in your life. I've come to find there are very few times in life that we're actually pushed to this kind of an extreme, or this close to the edge. For me, it's happened a couple times, and I really learned a lot about myself, what I was made of, what I could endure, what matters most to me. But ultimately, I've learned that we do control our reaction, our attitude, our mindsets, our response every single time. And so I think that's just important to remember, that you do control it. And so for me, and what I have been through, I can say that there has been a very powerful sense of self-ownership, agency, in recognizing that despite all of the uncertainty in life and so much that's just it seems like it's out of our control, that you do control your reaction and your attitude in your mindset, in your response every single time?
Control what you can control your mindset and all of your emotions internally. Be grateful for what you have as opposed to being, frustrated for what you don't. I think that all of our audience is incredibly lucky to have heard not only your story tonight, Dan, but to take away so many gems that you've been able to offer us. So thank you so much. And with that, team, our Q&A with Dan has now come to a close. So Dan, through your incredible stories and experiences, thank you so much for talking with us tonight about athlete mental toughness and well-being as a part of Trey Season 3. And in advance of passing it back to LaJoy, we have 2 quick notes for the audience. The first, please stick around for just a minute because LaJoy has a few reminders at the end in advance of finalizing our event. And number 2, we're going to launch a quick poll right now. So please complete this poll before you leave. Last but not least, finally, on behalf of every single one of our Trey athletes, coaches, and families, and on behalf of how well you represent our hometown of Topeka, Kansas, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. You are truly an inspiration. LaJoy, take us home.
Thank you so much. Definitely echoing Brian's sentiments, and we really appreciate you. Thank you for your service and for just sharing your experiences with us. You are an amazing role model, and we are so happy that you could join us tonight. A few reminders for everybody as we're wrapping up right now. There is a 2-question survey that's on your screen right now. Please take that so we can have your feedback. We definitely use that as we continue to improve our programming as we continue throughout Season 3. We do have another fire chat coming up next week, balancing school and sport. So make sure you register for that. We are going to put the link to register for that into our chat. We also have some other exciting events coming up as well. So be sure you are engaging with us on social media. And speaking of social media, you can win a pizza party. So make sure you're engaging with us, retweet us, tag us in your stories. We want to see how you're doing in Trey Season 3. For our coaches who are on the line with us tonight, please host your debrief session as soon as possible. And don't fret if your team couldn't join us live. We will be posting this amazing conversation on YouTube. So we'll have a link to that on our social media as well. Thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. Thank you again, Dan. And thank you, Brian. To athletes everywhere, have a great night.